Welcome back. We are joined again by Pepe Escobar, a prolific author and a journalist, to discuss the Memorandum of Understanding, which is supposed to be signed on Friday between the United States and Iran. So thank you for coming on. There's
My pleasure again. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Well, thanks again. And well, there's a lot to discuss here because, well, first of all, a good place to start would be all the secrecy around this memorandum of understanding. That is, the Iranians have made some of the information available, while the Americans seem to be not showing their cards at this point. So, why the secrecy, and what do we actually know about what's in this memorandum of understanding?
Well, Glenn, okay, I broke this before, but now I'm breaking to you and your audience in your channel. Larry Johnson and I have direct access to the negotiating table via the Pakistani mediators. And this has been going on for a few weeks now. So 3 weeks ago, Larry and we broke two stories back to back. The first one was a crucial phone call by Pezeshkian to Shehbaz Sharif, Prime Minister of Pakistan. Basically, it was a sort of ultimatum to the Americas: behave, and if you keep overstepping all the thresholds, and some of them that you know very, very well, we're going to have to do a demonstration. And you can imagine what sort of demonstration would that be. No more nuclear ambiguity. Well, the Americans read that and they were very, very angry. 3 days later, we broke another story about the Islamabad Accord. It was practically, I wouldn't say signed, sealed, delivered, reminding us of Stevie Wonder, but it was about to be signed. One of our American sources confirmed to us that Trump had a similar deal in front of him, ready to be signed 6 times. And he always backed off. This breaking news, we were explaining how the memorandum was being articulated, and this came from the Pakistanis who were on the table, negotiators. 3 days later, our channel was erased from YouTube by a direct order of the US government, Glenn. It was the kind of phone call that goes straight to Google, yank these people off. So now we are back with a very, very small channel, picking up what we managed to build in 2 or 3 weeks. It's called Transition Protocol. And the difference with the zillions of other channels on YouTube is that we have our intel directly from people who actually manipulating the intel or bridging gaps with the intel. So it's not only the Pakistani mediators between Iran and the US, but this can be confirmed with sources in the US and also with sources in Iran, Russia, and eventually China, or at least in China, people who have access to privileged information in China. So what we knew this weekend was essential, and this is something that we're discussing earlier this week. Abbas Araghchi was in Islamabad throughout the weekend. So he flew from Tehran specially to Islamabad to discuss the finer points and also the final points of the MOU. Then there was the Israeli attack on Dahieh, the Shiite suburb south of Beirut. So the Iranians, via the Pakistanis, and they were actually in Islamabad together discussing. Araghchi told the Pakistanis, look, send a warning to the Americans now. If Israel doesn't stop doing what they're doing against Dahieh and against the rest of Lebanon, we are ready. We have our fingers on the trigger literally now against Israel. So the response from the White House this time was practically immediate. Okay, that's it. And we're going to sign the MOU. And obviously, the people who were there talking to, they were not talking to Trump directly. Somebody from the inner circle. We're going to tell the Israelis to back off. So this is what was happening on Sunday night. That's why there was this announcement. On Trump's birthday, June 14th, the day of that absolutely ghastly series of cage matches in the White House lawn, which passes for a cultural exhibition in in the minds of the Trumpists, right? That's why we had the announcement by the US on June 14th about the MOU. And obviously, immediately afterwards, you can imagine, and you saw for yourself, and your audience saw all for yourselves, the crossfire all across the Beltway, the despair by the Zionist International, by all the neocon international, by the industrial military complex, everybody, about the MOU. But of course, no details. Even the fact, according to them, that Trump and Vance already electronically signed the MOU. We have not seen evidence about that anywhere. On the Iranian side, Glenn, it's a much more complex process, and much more sophisticated. It's not Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, the leader, who's giving the green light for the MOU. He delegated the final decision to the Supreme National Security Council, 13 members. Two of them only so-called reformists, including President Pezeshkian, and the other ones much more hardcore. So basically, Mojtaba instructed them, if you reach a solid majority among yourselves, the 13, if you have, like, let's say 9, 10, 11, etc., you are authorized to sign the MOU. And that's why we don't have so far, today is Wednesday, an official confirmation on Tehran that Tehran has already signed the MOU. So probably it's going to be left to the last minute in Geneva on Friday, and probably Galibaf himself signing in Geneva. So this is where we are at the moment. As you can see, the back and forth is absolutely frantic, but the Iranians are keeping their cool, like they did prior to these past 2 weeks, let's put it this way. They made it clear to the Americans that they are not in a hurry. They exasperated Trump to a point of he was, completely out of himself. And when they saw that there was a possibility of signing, and they were ready to sign, which was Sunday, there was the Israeli incident. And then once again, they sent the message. It's up to you, because Lebanon is part of the MOU, and you know it. We have been negotiating about it for weeks. If Israel interferes with it, we're going after Israel ourselves now. So this was, let's say, the last straw that convinced the Barbaria camel to actually play the game. But Glenn, we all know we don't know what this is going to lead from now on. This is nothing. This is just a promise to start talking.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That is often is portrayed as a deal, as if it will bring in peace. But yeah, it will usher in 2 months of negotiations. So, but I'm curious though. One of the main things that could derail this whole thing is it's very difficult in the US for Trump to sell to his people. That is in even the start of the ceasefire was based on the premise that, or at least it would have this point of departure to start from the 10-point plan of the Iranians. But as soon as the ceasefire was in place, Trump just walked that one back, because there was no way for him to essentially show this to his own people, because it was a defeat. But how about this? I mean, the peace that Trump is speaking of, which sounds like a victory, is very different from reality. So at some point, the actual text of this memorandum of understanding will have to come out, and it's going to be very hard for Trump to be the strong man, the one who can still mock Obama for the JCPOA, when this, by every metric, this is a huge setback for the US. None of his objectives have been achieved, and the Iranians will definitely come out on top here, so in a big way. So how can Trump go to his hawks, all of these people, and essentially said that the war was a massive failure? We bled out our inventory. We're in a much weaker position now than we were before, and the Iranians will be significantly strengthened. I mean, he's been describing this war as a big success ever since day one.
Mm-hmm. Well, he does that, Glenn, by twisting narratives, by inventing narratives, by forgetting previous narratives, by even forgetting what he said before he changed the narrative. That's his modus operandi. So there are three stages for him to declare this a victory. And this is where we are at the moment. He's basically saying that the oil will start to flow again through the Strait of Hormuz this Friday, which was the situation 3 months before he started the war on February 28th. So he's selling this as a victory. Now we have no problems with the oil anymore. So the oil markets are satisfied. The bond markets are satisfied, thanks to me. And he said that yesterday again in Evian, not far from where I am. I didn't even bother to go there because it's an absolute waste of time. He actually said that yesterday. I ended 10 wars. No, it's not a joke, Glenn. He actually said that in front of everybody, including the guests. It's absolutely fascinating that there are 4 BRICS at the G7 as guests: India, Brazil, Egypt, and UAE. So the G7 are desperate. They need to invite the BRICS to their summit, otherwise to be a little less irrelevant than they already are. Anyway, he also said, I am the boss. And there was no irony. He entered the room, everybody was in the room looking at him, and he said, I am the boss. And they laughed like this nervously because they know he is the boss. So what is the boss selling? Number one, I liberated the free flow of oil in the Strait of Hormuz, which is something that we all had before the war. Number two, the oil markets are going back to normal, the bond markets are going back to normal. So it's mission accomplished, even without going on top of an aircraft carrier like Dabia. And number three, he's playing for time. That's the most important part. He's playing for time. Nobody knows. Okay, for what? Essentially to rearm the US, because the war can be resumed anytime after the midterms. There won't be a resumption of war before the midterms. He wants to basically do damage control of his political capital in the run up towards the midterms. So he can sell these as a victory. And of course, the real nitty gritty is not now. The real nitty gritty will start in the second stage after the MOU. The first stage is these first 30 days. Then the negotiations start at a period that has been established as 60 days and maybe expanded. So this will be around August, late July, early August. Then we're going to have August, September, these discussions going all over the place. And it's going to be very acrimonious, of course. But he can always sell that, look, we want peace. And Iran doesn't want peace. They don't want to sign anything and all that. And he is absolutely convinced he can sell that to domestic public opinion as a victory. And then, cut some of his losses in the midterms. This is what it is. But the big picture, Glenn, which is something that you and I and many others study, which is the big war in Eurasia or against Eurasia, it's not going to change. It's going to be slowed down a little bit, because obviously this is a massive strategic defeat of the US, Israel against Iran. You cannot disguise that. You only sell this as a victory to absolute imbeciles. But he's going to try very, very hard. And a lot of people, even inside the US, won't be convinced. And especially the Ziocons and the industrial military complex, they are already, total fury against it. But playing for time in the next 2, 3, 4 months suits him very, very well. The Iranians have no illusions about it. And everybody from Galibaf to the IRGC commanders are saying, look, we're paying attention to every move. And if they try anything, we have our finger on the trigger, which is absolutely correct. They haven't changed their position. If in between like in the first 30 days of the MOU, and probably in the first part of the 60 days negotiation, they get some sanctions relief. They actually get the $12 billion, which is supposed to be paid in the next few days of a total of 24 billion. They get some extra money from from the UAE. They got already 2 billion from the UAE. That famous Emirati flight that landed in Tehran was carrying $2 billion in cash. And this was, once again, organized by the Pakistanis. The Pakistanis were the middlemen between Abu Dhabi and Tehran. If they can get these, and of course, the end of the American blockade of Hormuz, and they continue to sell, especially to their Asian clients, for Iran in the short term, excellent. Much better than it was until today. But they have no illusions long term and no illusions about the negotiations.
So, well, this is a problem for the United States. Well, again, if it's buying for time, strategic pause to, well, prepare itself back for war. The problem is that even after a pause, they can replenish and regroup. They still don't have a viable war plan, though, how to defeat the Iranians. Again, they couldn't do it the first time around. But I find it interesting that the Iranians demanded this buy-in. That is, if they can restart the war later, at least they have to first kick in this money now in the beginning to essentially buy themselves 2 months. But even this memorandum of understanding, this 2 months of peace, which might drag on, how would the Israelis respond to this, though? Because, as you said, the Iranians are very clear that they consider Lebanon to be part of this. That is, they're not going to have a peace deal, which essentially allows Israel and the United States to finish off Lebanon and then return to a war with Iran later on. They don't like this. They know the sequencing they would ideally have.
Sure.
So how will Trump control the Israelis here? Because I'm following some of the Israeli media, and neither the political or the leadership or the media seem very happy about the idea that they have to walk back from Lebanon. And some are suggesting, well, perhaps we'll bomb Beirut less, but under no circumstance will they depart Lebanon. But it's how exactly is this going to work?
Well, I love your diplomatic touch, Glenn. I prefer to go ACDC Highway to Hell, really hardcore. Anyway, if you look at the message that the Iranians delivered to the Americans on Sunday, this is how they're going to react. Essentially, they're telling the Americans, look, Lebanon, Hezbollah, everything is part of the MOU. You know it. We know it. If Israel breaks it, and if you don't help Israel, which is you should not do because they are breaking something that you agreed about, which is Lebanon as an integral part of the MOU, we are going to deal with them directly. So the answer is inbuilt in this attitude. The Iranians know, and the mediators know. We heard this from the Pakistanis at the table. Not only the Pakistanis at the table, but also other players they were talking to, especially Qatar and Saudi Arabia. The most important, apart from UAE. They know that Israel can break this thing anytime they see fit, which is always. And they're ready for it, and they have no illusions. But the Iranians already told the Americans how they're going to react. Okay, if they break it, we're going to bomb Israel really, really hard. And there's nothing you can do about it. And if you intervene, then this means you break the MOU. If you break the MOU, we will also break the MOU. So that's the basic difference between now and the recent past in US-Iran relations. If commitments are broken, now it's not unilateral anymore, it's bilateral. And the Iranians have been sending this message to the Americans virtually every day. Glenn, I don't know if anybody in that ultra mediocre circle around Trump actually understands what that means. I don't think they understand it yet. So they're going to have to see it live. If the bombing of Dahieh especially continues, And the Israeli plan from Dahieh is Gaza 2.0. Make no mistake about it. They want to occupy southern Lebanon permanently and to turn Dahieh into a new Gaza. If that continues, the Iranians already said, no way. So how is the Trump administration going to react to that? Is Trump willing to bomb his own MOU, which he is selling as a victory as we speak?
Yeah, well, I did want to ask about another aspect of this whole war, which is the role of Pakistan. I remember I was interviewed by some Indian TV networks when Pakistan began to take on this role as mediator, because they were asking essentially why not India? Well, a variety of reasons, but putting that aside, how do you see this diplomatic role of Pakistan, though? Because this is it's given it's quite an important diplomatic status in the region, and given that it's also a key player in this region, which is undergoing so much change, how do you see this shifting the dynamics of yeah?
They played it very well, Glenn. Very, very well. In fact, none of us were expecting that they would pull it off. And of course, many of us independent analysts, we have deep reservation vis-a-vis the current government in Pakistan. It's another story. But if you look at the realpolitik, and if you look at the facts on the ground and the facts that they managed to establish as mediators, it's immensely impressive. We heard that the whole top level of the Pakistani government is involved in the mediation. Literally everybody that matters. So it's not only the Prime Minister, General Asim Munir, and the Foreign Minister Dar. Everybody. Why they managed to do that? For several reasons. Very good relations with Iran. Very good relations, even more important, with China, because China was backing what Pakistan was doing all the way. Remember the first meeting of the four Sunnis in Islamabad: Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt. The next morning, Dar hopped on a plane and went to Beijing to talk to Wang Yi and explain what they did to Wang Yi. And Wang Yi gave new directives. Guys, you have to try harder. You're not going anywhere. So China was always behind them. Even further behind, but in consultation with China, was Russia. Because everybody, okay, let's work all of us together for a deal, because none of us want this war here, because we know that the war is against all of us. It's a war against Eurasia integration by definition, and against one full BRICS and SCO member. So this member has to be defended by other BRICS and SCO members. More than obvious. Why not India? Key question, which the people who interview, they could never formulate it, because they know the answer. 2 days before the February 28th decapitation attack against Ayatollah Khamenei and the leadership, Modi and Netanyahu were exchanging kisses. An unbreakable relationship, mother and father, and all that crap. So that's not good. From the beginning, India was aligned with Israel. So they could never be a mediator between Iran, and even though they need Iran for their version of the New Silk Roads. The International North-South Transportation Corridor, once again, 3 BRICS: Russia, Iran, and India. And India needs it badly, because this is their new Silk Road towards Afghanistan and Central Asia, using the port of Chabahar. So they betrayed themselves once again, which the Indians are specialists in doing that, right? Meanwhile, with the back of China, with the full backing of China, Pakistan was very busy organizing this alignment between Iran, Pakistan, and China. Not only geopolitical, diplomatic, but also geoeconomic. And that's where the new Silk Roads and Eurasia integration come into the picture once again. It's our favorite theme in your line of work, in my line of work for almost 2 decades. The shortest way overland between Iran and China to trade is not via Central Asia, it's via Pakistan. Very, very simple. Pakistan is part of the New Silk Roads, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Kashgar, Islamabad, across Balochistan, Gwadar Port. Iran is part of the International North-South Transportation Corridor, using Chabahar once again as the key port going to India. But Chinese tankers, as I saw by myself last year when I went to Chabahar, they also go to, they also do their trade stopping Chabahar, not only in Bandar Abbas. And now, which is something that none of us could even imagine 3 months ago, the port of Chabahar and the port of Gwadar now are sister ports. There's only 80 kilometers between them. So Chabahar in Sistan, Balochistan, Gwadar in the Arabian Sea, in Pakistan and Balochistan. Iran is using, when the American blockade started, Iran started to use Gwadar as an Iranian port, sister to Chabahar. And sooner or later, depending on how things evolve, the Chinese are already looking at Chabahar and said, maybe we can get another Iranian port for us. And then the Indians will be once again sidelined because they did not bet in the right horse once again. So this, when the Pakistanis announced a few weeks ago that there were 6 border crossings between Iran and Pakistan were free for trade anytime, 24/7, this was also a Chinese suggestion. Look, you have all these border trades with Iran. They are being more or less suffocated by the maritime blockade. So give them overland passes. That's exactly what happened. And also, of course, the very important railway from Xinjiang across Central Asia, crossing from Turkmenistan to Iran, which was, by the way, built and paid for by the Chinese. Another corridor of the New Silk Roads. So everything is interconnected. And everything explains why Pakistan, between Iran and China, would have to be the mediator from the Iranian side, plus the very good relations between Pakistan and the GCC, especially with Qatar, and in the case of Saudi Arabia, even more because they have a military pact. And of course, the fact that you have Field Marshal Simonin picking up the phone and Donald Trump on the other side immediately answers. Very few people can do that. So they had goodwill from all the players, all the major players. Okay, it's a very long story on what they're going to do with their new geopolitical position, etc. Are they going to lean this way or that? That's another story. In terms of facilitating a measure of dialogue between Washington and Tehran, they managed to pull it off. And this is an outstanding achievement. But never forget, they could do this because they had China in the back overseeing everything.
Yeah, I remember a decade ago, I wrote a book on this. It was
You did?
Russia's geoeconomic strategy for Greater Eurasia, and I was pointing out how this dynamic was working because the Chinese connecting with not just with Pakistan but also towards Iran, and also this was complemented by what the Russians were doing in that region as well. But even back then, I hadn't expected Pakistan to play such an active role. I thought it would be more shaped by its external environment rather than taking this more autonomous, independent role. So this is, it surprised me as well.
We're right. We were all stunned, Glenn. We're all absolutely stunned. So, okay, we have to give them credit for it. And of course, they have their own reasons. They want to sort of pacify Balochistan, which is very complicated with the Balochistan Liberation Movement, separatists and all that, border with Iran. They want energy from Iran. Very, very important. And this leads to a story that many of us were following 15 years ago, at least, the Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline, which the Americans never allowed to proceed. Now, the coast is clear to finally, the Iranian part of the pipeline is already built. The Iranians offered a few years ago to pay for the Pakistani stretch. So now this is inevitable. So we're going to have the IP pipeline finally. Finally, this is one of those Pipeline-stan soap operas that never end. This time we're going to have a happy ending. So they need Iran for, and of course, the geoeconomic integration of West Asia and South Asia favors Pakistan as well, with the backing of China and interlocking with the New Silk Roads.
Well, if you take a step back, what does this mean for how the United States have to adjust to this? I mean, they're not going to like it. They probably will fight in tooth and nail.
Of course.
But at some point, ignoring reality comes at a high cost. And we're currently seeing the US draw down its forces in Europe and also, I guess, lesser extent in the Middle East now. Some of it forced, of course, by its bases being bombed out in the Gulf states. But also some of the fronts they were building up against Iran, they're seemingly drawing down now, which is some reason for optimism that this might hold, at least if the reports are correct. Do you see the United States, I guess, pulling back from Europe and the Middle East? I would have assumed that in the wider, in my ideal scenario for the United States, ideal being defined as how it would optimally adjust to new international distribution of power, it can't be everywhere. I would assume that the ideal for the US is to prioritize the Western Hemisphere and East Asia, as this is where China is. I mean, when I say optimal, not in the normative sense, but in the international distribution of power, where it wants to focus its power. In other words, it would have to draw down in the Middle East and Europe. It didn't seem like it wanted to do this first, but now it seems it's being forced to do so. Or do you read the situation a bit differently?
They are being forced to do that because they are being slowly, and now not so slowly, but surely being expelled from Eurasia. Period. This is the key point. It's a strategic defeat against Iran. So this is a huge step towards expelling the US from Eurasia. And it's no wonder that the national security strategy privileges the Western Hemisphere. So we can expect a lot of trouble for Latin America from now on. That's out of the question. Starting with the elections in Brazil later this year, which will be heavily interfered with. No question at all. Did you see that Trump didn't even shake hands with Lula at the G7? So it's very, the situation is very, very tense. And of course, the strategic threat number one, according to the plutocracy that rules the US, is China. So it is East Asia. Absolutely. It is Taiwan and the South China Sea. No question. Everything. So obviously, compared to these two fronts, West Asia, it's not so essential. But how they are going to digest this massive strategic geopolitical defeat, that's another story. This is going to enrage the people at the top, the elites in the back, the plutocrats, all of them, of course, and there will be revenge. There will be blood. It's a revengeful nation. It's the logic of revenge always predominates. So maybe they will back off for a while, regroup, but they will go after Iran again. There's no question about that. Maybe not this year, but starting next year.
Yeah, no, I think it's hard to avoid that. I just have a hard time imagining the US calling it a day. I mean, I remember across
we know, yeah,
all the talking heads. So in the United States, on all the TV networks, they had the same slogan when things started to go poorly in the war against Iran. They were all saying, in unison, this is short-term pain for long-term gain. This was the talking point, but it's it's turning out to be a very short-term pain for long-term strategic defeat. I mean, this is it's looking quite terrible, but But again, no one wants to take political ownership of this, and nobody wants to adjust to this new diminished role in the world, especially given, with Israel there as well, it becomes very politically sensitive. So they can't accept this defeat. But on the other hand, there's not much they can do. So it does beg the question what they're going to do. But meanwhile, let's say they wait a whole year before they restart this war. The world will look like a very different place a year from now. I mean, by not even a whole year, but even by 2027, which kind of takes me to my last question, which is about the Gulf states. Well, how are they going to look after this? Because if the Americans are telling them to, sit idly by, we might try to do this over again in a year from now. I mean, they will have to adjust to realities if they want to survive. I mean, doesn't they don't have to like Iran. They can hate it by all their heart, but at some point, you have to bet on the winning horse. You have to,
Absolutely.
adjust to the reality that Iran is now administrating the Strait of Hormuz, and the U.S. probably won't be able to defeat them.
Absolutely. And this that's where Pakistan comes in again, because they are already working on it, because they have very good channels of communication with all the GCC petromonarchies, and because they are proving to them, look, we worked hard on your concerns, your recommendations, your suggestions to get the MOU and to get the negotiations going. We were listening not only to Iran, but to all of you at the same time and all that. And obviously, they understand that. Qatar understands this very well. MBS understands this very well. And the relationship MBS and Islamabad, very, very close. The military pact, etc. There are a lot of... Apparently, there are already 8,000 Pakistani soldiers in Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, with lots of fighter jets. So Pakistan is working to convince, especially the Saudis, but some other GCC players, look, there's going to be a new protective umbrella here, and we offer our services to be your umbrella. And we're going to have a very, very special guest in the background supporting everything we're doing. China. Can you imagine the GCC saying no to this arrangement? Not going to happen. And obviously, they experienced by themselves that their petrodollar alliance with the US is worth nothing. When push came to shove, the US was defending their aircraft carrier in West Asia, not the GCC petromonarchies. So they learned their lesson. At least we assume they learned their lesson. Some more than others, of course. The UAE is still... The Pakistani negotiators, they told Larry and I something about a month ago, which stuck. They say, look, wait a while. Wait like 3 months. The UAE, they will see which way the wind is blowing, and they will want to have an accommodation with Iran as well. So I kept this in the back of my mind all the time, because it's already happening, sort of. They are not as antagonistic towards Iran as they were a month ago. And of course, they're going to have to live with Iran as the number one power in that part of West Asia. They cannot escape that. Otherwise, very simple. The Iranians sent a message. Look, we already destroyed the Dubai business model. For us to destroy the Abu Dhabi energy model is very, very easy. Just a few strikes. That's it. We can do it anytime we want. So, negotiating table again, now between GCC and Iran, with Pakistan in the middle, as the go-betweens. Perfectly. And once again, coming back to what you were expressing, your concerns, will the US admit that this is the new rules of the game regionally? They will never admit it. But what can they do? Can they seduce the GCC petromonarchies back? No, they cannot. Can they bribe them? No, they cannot. Can they promise that they're going to deal with Iran? They cannot. Can they promise that they're going to give them as much relevance as they give to Israel? They cannot. There you go. So the Pakistanis and the Chinese are once again looking long term. So this protective umbrella will change, of course. And Iran is looking at it, and because China is involved, they can feel relatively comfortable with that because they can think that this will not turn against them in the long run. So the role of China in the back of it all is absolutely essential. But this is a very complicated case, Glenn. We as foreigners, we cannot have an in-depth conversation in China about these matters because they consider it a matter of national security of China. And they will never discuss this with foreigners. So I expect the next time I go there, I can talk to some of my, let's say, former military connections for that matter, and they will have a few nuggets because they still know people inside the machinery of government, right? But this is going to take a little while. But once again, well, they are absolute masters of applying Sun Tzu. No? They don't have to raise a finger or have a shot at anything, and in the end, they get what they want with their connections and, of course, playing Go. They were playing Go in West Asia with the Americas. They were encircling the Americas in a way the Americans didn't even see it coming.
Well, that's the thing, though. When they went to war against Iran, the Americans expecting this quick victory, I think not many people realized that they were also gambling on the entire Gulf States alliance because, well, not just their U.S. bases being bombed out, but of course the security guarantees seeming much less convincing. And if the Gulf State alliance begins to crumble, that means the petrodollar system begins to crumble. If this goes away, the AI bubble can't sustain itself. Which means that the entire AI war and economic war with China takes a very dark turn for the Americans. I mean, there's a massive potential unraveling here that looks more and more likely. Again, I don't want to make any predictions because this is a horrible time for predictions. Too many things are happening too fast. I mean, it's with none of the variables remaining constant here, it's not a great time to make predictions, but you do see this coming apart at the seams. This isn't going to go very well, I think. Any final words?
Well, we are all very curious to see if there are going to be actual solid negotiations, even in this first 30-day phase of the Memorandum of Understanding. So this is where we are at the moment. I think after a few days, all of us will have a clear idea if the Americans are serious about discussing all the 14 points or if this is just a crude play for time. I think this is, in terms of predictions, Glenn, this is as far as we can go at the moment.
Yeah, I know. Well, I kind of thought myself that I almost took for granted that this defeat would be too much for the Americans to swallow, that they would essentially seek some kind of a negotiation to buy for time and regroup and then have another go at it. But again, this isn't your average defeat. This is going to be very painful. So I think I could be wrong. It could be that Trump's willing to, he recognized that they bit over more than they can chew, and he just wants to get away from this. So I'm very cautious about making predictions these days.
Absolutely correct, all of us.
Yeah. Anyways,
to be very Chinese about it, we're just are watching at the margins the body float by the river. That's where we are at the moment.
Well, Pepe, thank you so much for taking time, and
always a pleasure, Glenn.
Let's catch up again soon.
Absolutely. Cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye.